Stop for a moment, freeze exactly where you are. Now ask yourself this question: how many of your thoughts right now are actually yours? How many of your desires, fears, beliefs, and choices genuinely originate from your authentic self versus being programmed into you by forces you've never consciously recognized? If this question makes you uncomfortable, good. Because Carl Jung discovered something so disturbing, so fundamentally unsettling about human consciousness that most people spend their entire lives avoiding it. You are not as free as you think you are. In fact, you're being controlled right now by invisible psychological forces that were installed in your mind before you could even speak. Jung called this phenomenon the collective unconscious. And it's not some abstract philosophical concept. It's a real, measurable psychological infrastructure that shapes your thoughts, drives your behaviors, and determines your reality in ways you've never imagined. And here's the truly dark part. This system is designed to keep you unconscious of its existence. The control is most effective when you don't know you're being controlled. Let me show you exactly how this works, and I promise you, once you see it, your entire understanding of yourself and reality will never be the same. Jung discovered that beneath your personal unconscious, the repository of your forgotten memories and repressed experiences, there exists a deeper layer of unconscious material that you didn't create. This collective unconscious contains what Jung called archetypes, universal psychological patterns that have been inherited through countless generations of human evolution. Think of archetypes as psychological software that comes pre-installed in every human brain. You didn't choose to install these programs. You didn't consent to their presence, but they're there, running in the background of your consciousness, influencing everything you think, feel, and do. The hero archetype makes you seek challenges and conquests. The mother archetype shapes how you nurture and protect. The shadow archetype contains everything your conscious mind rejects about itself. The trickster creates chaos and disruption. The sage seeks wisdom and meaning. These aren't just interesting personality types, they're autonomous psychological forces that can possess you, control you, and hijack your consciousness without your awareness. Here's where it gets truly dark. These archetypes don't just influence you personally, they operate collectively, creating mass psychological phenomena that control entire populations. Jung watched this happen in real time during World War II, when the shadow archetype possessed the collective unconscious of Nazi Germany, turning millions of ordinary people into participants in unimaginable evil. And here's what most people miss. It's happening right now. The same archetypal forces that drove Nazi Germany, that fueled witch hunts, that created crusades and inquisitions, they're still operating. They're running in your unconscious mind right now, shaping your political beliefs, your tribal allegiances, your fears of the other, your need for enemies and scapegoats. Every time you feel inexplicable hatred toward a group you've never personally met, that's archetypal possession. Every time you follow a leader who promises to destroy your perceived enemies, that's the hero-shadow dynamic hijacking your consciousness. Every time you participate in mob mentality, cancel culture, or collective outrage, you're being controlled by forces Jung mapped out decades ago. But the manipulation goes even deeper than you think. Because the archetypes don't just control your negative impulses, they control your positive ones too. That feeling of falling in love, that might not be about the actual person, it's your anima or animus archetype projecting onto them, seeing in them qualities that exist in your own unconscious. That spiritual awakening you had could be the self-archetype activating, but it might also be spiritual bypassing, driven by the persona, trying to maintain its illusion of goodness. Your entire identity, everything you think defines who you are, might just be a collection of archetypal patterns that you've unconsciously adopted. The rebel teenager activating the shadow to differentiate from parents. The young adult embodying the hero to prove their worth. The midlife crisis as the self demands recognition. Even your spiritual journey might just be following an archetypal script that billions of humans have followed before you. This is the dark psychology trick Jung discovered. Your sense of individual autonomy is largely an illusion. You think you're making free choices, but you're actually following archetypal patterns that have been controlling human behavior for millennia. You think your thoughts are original, but you're actually channeling collective psychological currents that flow through all of humanity. And here's the most disturbing part. The system is designed to keep itself hidden. The moment you start to become conscious of archetypal control, other archetypes activate to protect the system. The trickster makes you doubt what you're discovering. The shadow projects onto anyone who threatens your unconscious patterns. The persona desperately tries to maintain the comfortable fiction that you're in control. This is why Jung said that becoming conscious is the most difficult work a human can undertake. Because you're not just fighting against your personal resistances, you're fighting against archetypal forces that have controlled humanity since the beginning of consciousness. You're trying to see the invisible puppeteer while the puppeteer actively works to remain invisible. But here's where Jung's discovery becomes revolutionary rather than just disturbing. Once you become conscious of archetypal control, you gain the power to work with these forces rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. This is the difference between being possessed by an archetype and consciously integrating it. When the hero archetype possesses you, you become compulsively driven to prove yourself, to conquer, to be special, often at the cost of your relationships, health, and authentic self. But when you consciously integrate the hero, you can access its courage and strength when needed, while not being enslaved by its demands for constant achievement. When the shadow possesses you, you project all your denied darkness onto others, creating enemies everywhere, living in constant judgment and conflict. But when you consciously integrate the shadow, you reclaim the power and qualities that were locked in your unconscious, becoming more whole and less prone to projection. This conscious integration is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming aware of archetypal control, and then consciously choosing which patterns to embody rather than being unconsciously driven by them. It's the difference between being a puppet and being the puppeteer. It's the shift from unconscious control to conscious choice. But let me be brutally honest with you. Most people will never do this work, because becoming conscious of archetypal control requires facing truths about yourself that your ego desperately wants to avoid. It means recognizing that your most cherished beliefs might be archetypal programs rather than authentic insights. It means admitting that your strongest convictions might be collective patterns rather than individual truths. It means looking at your political tribe and recognizing archetypal possession rather than rational positions. It means examining your spiritual beliefs and seeing archetypal patterns rather than divine revelation. It means questioning your life choices and discovering they might have been unconsciously scripted by archetypal forces rather than freely chosen by your authentic self. This is terrifying. This threatens your entire sense of identity and autonomy. This is why most people, when they glimpse archetypal control, immediately shut down, deny, and go back to unconscious living. The illusion of free will is more comfortable than the reality of archetypal influence. But for those brave enough to look, for those willing to face the dark truth of psychological control, Jung offers something extraordinary: real freedom. Not the fake freedom of unconscious reactivity, but the genuine freedom that comes from consciousness. When you can see the archetypes operating, when you understand the collective currents flowing through your psyche, when you recognize manipulation as it's happening, you gain the power to choose differently. You can feel the hero archetype activating and choose whether to follow its script or not. You can notice the shadow projecting and withdraw the projection instead of attacking the perceived enemy. You can observe the persona performing and reveal your authentic self instead. You can sense collective currents trying to sweep you along and consciously choose to stand still. This is psychological sovereignty, true authority over your own consciousness. But it comes at a price. You can never go back to unconscious living. Once you see archetypal control, you see it everywhere. In yourself, in others, in society, in history. You become excruciatingly aware of how rare genuine consciousness is and how pervasive archetypal possession remains. You'll watch people you love being controlled by invisible forces they can't see. You'll observe society being driven by archetypal currents while everyone believes they're making rational choices. You'll witness mass psychological phenomena and recognize the archetypal patterns that Jung mapped decades ago, playing out again and again because humanity remains unconscious. This is the burden of consciousness that Jung spoke about, knowledge that you can't unknow, awareness that separates you from the collective, the ability to see the matrix while everyone else remains plugged in. It's lonely, it's difficult, and it's absolutely necessary if humanity is going to evolve beyond unconscious archetypal control. Because here's what Jung ultimately discovered. The collective unconscious isn't just controlling us, it's also evolving through us. Every individual who becomes conscious, who integrates their archetypes, who withdraws their projections, who chooses awareness over unconsciousness, contributes to the evolution of human consciousness itself. You're not just freeing yourself from archetypal control, you're helping to free the species. Your individual work of becoming conscious has collective implications. Your personal integration of the shadow reduces collective shadow projection. Your conscious relationship with archetypes makes it easier for others to see them too. This is why Jung dedicated his life to making the unconscious conscious. He understood that humanity's survival depends on enough individuals waking up from archetypal possession. As long as we remain unconsciously controlled by collective psychological forces, we'll keep repeating the same patterns, the same wars, the same persecutions, the same tribal conflicts, the same cycles of destruction. But as more individuals become conscious, as more people learn to recognize and integrate archetypal influences, we create the possibility for genuine psychological and spiritual evolution. We move from being unconscious puppets to conscious participants in our own psychological reality. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. Now that you know about this dark psychological control, now that you understand archetypal possession, now that you see how invisible forces have been shaping your thoughts and choices, what are you going to do about it? Will you dismiss this knowledge, go back to unconscious living, continue being controlled by forces you refuse to acknowledge? That's the easy path, and most people take it. Or will you have the courage to start the difficult work of becoming conscious, of recognizing archetypal patterns, of integrating your shadow, of achieving genuine psychological sovereignty? The choice is yours. But understand this, there's no neutral ground. Either you become conscious of archetypal control and begin the work of integration, or you remain unconscious and continue being controlled. There is no third option. The dark psychology trick Jung discovered doesn't stop working just because you don't believe in it. The archetypes don't need your belief, they only need your unconsciousness. If you're ready to begin the journey from unconscious control to conscious freedom, if you're willing to face the disturbing truth about how your mind has been manipulated by invisible forces, if you're brave enough to question everything you thought was authentically yours, then write in the comments, "I choose consciousness over control." Share this message with someone who needs to wake up from archetypal possession. Subscribe, because this journey of becoming conscious is the most important work you'll ever do. Your psychological sovereignty is waiting, but only if you're willing to see what's really controlling you.